In 2004, Madelaine Weiss had flesh eating disease, which started as strep throat and extended into her arm. And she had a 1% chance of survival. The doctors were threatening to remove her upper right quadrant, but after 7 weeks in the hospital and 3 months off of her post at Harvard Medical School, here she is. She is here today. She is happy. She is
Mm.
healthy. She is prosperous. She is productive. And she comes with a smile. Welcome, Madelaine.
You can't see me, whoever is listening, but I hope you can feel my smile. Because
Oh,
as I was listening to it, I was sort of having an out-of-body
oh,
experience, as if you were talking about someone else, and it made me
okay.
smile.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
You're a busy lady.
I've lived a long time.
That's a perfect answer to that. I love that.
Well, yeah, it's true. It's true. You
Okay,
live long enough, you have a chance to do a lot of different things.
that is correct. Okay, so Madelaine, tell us your
Yes.
story.
So, I want to clarify one thing. I mentioned strep throat because it's the same strep as strep throat, but it wasn't strep throat because it wasn't in my throat, it was in my arm. So when you have that strep in your throat, you take antibiotics and then you're fine. In the arm, it's a completely different story. It's deadly. And I had no idea. All I knew was that my elbow hurt. And one of the hallmarks of flesh eating disease, which I know unfortunately more about than I would otherwise have known, one of the hallmarks is pain out of proportion to anything that you can see. So it hurts like crazy and it looks like nothing.
Wow,
Yeah, so on my first trip to the OR, to the ER, or what do they call it now? The ED, the emergency department. On my first trip there, they kind of thought it was nothing and sent me home with a couple of prescriptions, but it was 2 in the morning and it wasn't a particularly good neighborhood. My son was just home from his first year of college. And of course, you know what he was doing. He was sleeping, and I didn't want to wake him up. So I just went into his room and sort of patted him gently and gave him a little kiss on the head and said, I have to go out for a few minutes. I'll be back soon. And I went to the emergency department at Mass General, and then they sent me home. And they, after keeping me there for quite a while, or what I remember as being like forever, they drew an ink mark down my arm and said, if the redness travels down through this, where we drew a border for you, you should come back.
really?
And yeah. And so I went back in the morning because it had traveled all the way down my arm. And it was really rather like traumatic from I mean, what else would it be, right? But there were just certain things about it that made it even more so. So I remember sitting in the waiting room. They told me exactly where to go. They told me to go to surgical care unit or something like that. And so I went there, and there's a sign on the wall and it says, "Your pain matters to us." And I'm sitting there and
Oh,
I see like nurses poking their heads around because it wasn't exactly 7:30. And I'm in this excruciating pain. And I said, like, do you have like a Tylenol or something? And they
oh,
said, I know, it's so sad. And they said, well, we're not open yet. So so I sat there crying, and they finally took me in and they reprimanded me. They said, "We see that your prescriptions are hanging out of your purse, so you didn't have them filled." And I said, "Well, it was 2 in the morning and it's a bad neighborhood and I was by myself. So I thought I would do that in the morning when it would be safer. But then I saw it went down past the ink. So here I am." And they said, "Well, go get your prescriptions filled
oh my word.
and call us and keep us posted on how you're doing." So the next day I woke up with like blisters like all over it was all purple and blistery. It was really kind of grotesque. And they finally admitted me. And once they admitted me, they took very, very good care of me.
Mm.
But it was not easy getting in.
Uh, how long
To-
ago was this?
so that must have been, yeah, like 2004.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Go ahead.
Well, so they said they were going, the treatment for this disease is amputation.
Got it.
So they said they were going to amputate the surgeons wanted to amputate my upper right quadrant.
So
And
before you continue, let me stop you there and ask you what emotions were running through you at that point? How did you respond internally?
I noticed in your materials you say things about miracles. It is only recently that I've begun to think about it somewhat in that context myself. There was the head of infectious disease, a lovely, lovely man, came to I was on like a cot in the hallway. I would say my bedside, but it wasn't exactly a bedside. And he came up to me and he said to me, all these doctors, one by one, were saying to me, "You have a 99% chance of dying."
Wow.
And I finally said to them, "I hear you. I got it. Why do you all keep saying that?" And
Yeah.
I figured out later that maybe they were trying to get me ready for why I needed this amputation, so that
Oh,
yeah, that I'm just guessing because that sort of
right.
makes sense to me. But this lovely angel of a man came up to me and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what it is about you. There's something in your eyes. I don't know what it is, but I think you can fight this. And I'm
Wow.
gonna yeah, and I'm gonna let you do that. I'm gonna tell them all to back off and to
Huh.
let you do that." And he said, "This is the hardest decision I have ever made in my life, in my whole professional career. And if I'm wrong, you're dead."
Wow.
I know. So wow. And he let me fight this wicked thing off. And you can't see it, but I have my arm. It's not without scars because they had to do skin grafting and they took skin from my leg to my arm. But I can remember the first, like when I was released from the hospital, I was in the hospital for 7 weeks. I had 10 trips to the OR for them to
Wow.
clean things out and to repair it. And I remember sitting down in front of my laptop with my, you can't even imagine how swollen my fingers were. I wasn't even supposed to be able to use my hand. And I remember putting it on the keyboard and then they moved. And I thought, oh my God, I can type. It's like, as long as I can type, I can live. That's how, that's how attached I am to my laptop. But yeah.
Did they ever figure out how you got this?
Well, see, that's the thing. Nobody knows how I got it. I will say that my office at the medical school was next door to a lab where the students were doing research, and there was a strep spill. The
Oh,
met the medical school did studies on this, and their finding was that it was a different strain of strep A than the one that I had.
hmm.
So so I don't I don't get too involved cognitively and
Right, right,
emotionally.
right, of course.
I'm not going there because it doesn't matter anymore. But I don't, yeah. So I don't know. I was at a meeting the night before and there was a hole in the screen and a mosquito came in. So I have no idea.
Right.
And no one else knows it. Yeah, it's like, who gets this? Like,
Yeah,
what is
yeah,
what is
exactly.
this? What is this doing in my body? Who gets this? I went to physical therapy every day after work. When I started working, I would go after work. Before I went back to work, I was going whenever, but for 6 months. And there's honestly nothing I can't do with that hand. I
Really?
also, yeah, I also started knitting back then. I started knitting again now for something called Knots of Love, where it's an organization. This is just a little aside for anybody who
Right, right.
is interested in this, where they use you knit and donate chemo caps and
Oh,
yeah, and also blankets for the newborns in the NICU. So
okay.
the neo, so shout out to Knots of Love. I think it's great what they're doing. But
Right,
I wasn't supposed to be able to do anything at all. Well, I wasn't even supposed to have the arm with the hand.
exactly.
So that's my miracle.
So tell us about your life before this all happened.
You know, I have when I go to the primary care doctor, let's say, they say things to me like, and I mean this in the larger sense than that, but I'm going to give it to you in this context first. They say things to me like, you are such a train wreck on paper,
Oh,
because I've had thyroid cancer, I had this flesh, this crazy thing. I mean, I've had stuff. They say, you are such a train wreck on paper. And then you walk in and it's like, ta-da, like the picture of health and happiness.
right.
And I think the train wreck kind of started really early on. I mentioned to you that John Kabat-Zinn, who's thought to be the father of Western mindfulness, and numbers of whose books I have read, and I teach mindfulness also. I actually trained under him for a whole week, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But one of his books is entitled Full Catastrophe Living. The idea being, as wonderful as it all is, also the whole thing is a catastrophe too. This whole thing that we call
Mm,
life is like one thing after another. And that was
mhm,
certainly, certainly true for me. So and I think I mentioned to you about being over disciplined as a child in ways that, everything's connected to everything else.
mhm,
So there were things about that that caused other problems, or that led me to create my own other problems. So I had a very strict father who honestly, again, I kind of rewrite things, and I invite all your listeners to be able to do that too. That we don't necessarily rewrite, we don't necessarily write the beginning of the story, but we can recreate the middle.
Oh,
And
that's perfectly said. Thank you for that.
oh, you're welcome. And so my thought about my very strict father is that I was such a sort of ball on fire. One of my favorite memories is going to my first day of kindergarten, and there was a tricycle in the room. So I got on it and just rode out. I just left on the tricycle the first day of kindergarten, thinking that's what you're supposed to do. If there's a bike there, you get on it, and that wasn't a good thing to do. And I kind of talked back a lot. I always had an opinion about something. So um, I think my father's instinct was to keep me kind of safe,
Okay.
and how it manifested, how it implemented was I was grounded all the time. So my friends were always out and having sleepover parties, and my mother was a very busy lady. She was out all the time. My brother was very active, president of the school, and he was out all the time. And my father worked like a dog, so he was out all the time. But I was grounded, so I was kind of there.
Interesting.
And I wrote, this is what I mean, like everything's connected to everything else. To entertain myself, which I'm extremely good at for obvious reasons. I had a lot of practice, 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 and opportunity. I used to write books. So, and I'd create a cover with my crayons, and
Really?
yeah, and
Wow.
I sew up the middle with yarn and a big fat needle to hold the binding together. And yeah, so now I have my two books, the ones I wrote as an adult, but I've been doing that since then as a response to the trauma of my confinement. And, when I was thinking about getting together with you today, Carol, and your audience, I was thinking, oh, like, what is it? I was asking myself, and you might be curious too, like, what does it account for having gone through so much of what I went through, or so much of what other people go through? What is it that allows for or creates this well-being, either in spite of or because of? Like, how do you get to a great life from that kind of suffering?
Do you think that a lot of that has to do with empathy? Because when I think that, like I don't know if you've read my book, Battered Hope, but it's so much trauma and one on top of the other.
Okay.
And when you're going through it, you just wonder how you're going to be able to go through it without putting one foot in front of the other and just persevering. But in
Yeah.
hindsight, you look back and people, I know this is what in your life as well. So many people say, how did you manage? How did you get through? Did you want to give up? And all those things. But what it does for me, anyway, is when someone approaches me with something that they feel that they just cannot make it through, because you've been there, you can say you can. And I'm
Yeah.
speaking from experience. So
Yeah.
is that kind of like what you're saying?
Yeah, people used to say to me with the flesh eating
Right.
example, they used to say to me, it made you so strong. And
Exactly.
I would correct that. I would say
Okay.
that, yeah, I would say to them, well, first I would thank them because I know they meant well when they said
Right.
that. But I would say it's not that it made me strong. It's that we're kind of made with internal resources that we don't
Mm.
that we don't even know we have until we need them.
Until they're tested, right?
That's how they're discovered.
Yeah.
Like, I
Okay.
don't I don't think people necessarily know what all is in there for us until they have to go get it because they need to use it. So I didn't think that it made me strong. I thought it let me, and apparently a lot of other people, know how strong, not just how strong I am, but how strong we humans are,
Mm,
how resilient we are, how
right.
creative we are, um, how just amazing we are that, and we don't know sometimes until we need it.
Very good point. Excellent point.
Yeah.
And
Thank
a
you.
good answer because we're many of us are asked that same question, right?
Yep.
So good answer. So tell
Yep.
us about your dad. You wrote here that he became one of the 120,000 work stress related deaths per year.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't realize this until much later in my life either, that my father had made a promise to his mother on her deathbed, and she died when he was um, maybe high school, graduating high school, somewhere around then. And
Okay.
he made a promise to her that he would take care of his father and the family business. So my father was up at like 5 in the morning and out the door. The family business was connected to my grandfather's home. So, like in the heat, he'd make sure that my grandfather's air conditioner was on. And he was always in the shop, we called it, very early in the morning. And then he like wasn't home until 10 at night. And except maybe on weekends, he was home for Sunday night dinner. And on Friday nights, we would have also dinner together because I would go to my grandparents. So he was
Mm,
already there because the shop
mm,
was connected to there. So the man worked pretty hard.
yeah.
And it was this passionate devotion to the business and his father, and most of all, to his mother and the promise that he made to her that likely fed the hypertension that eventually killed him at 42 years old. He died suddenly
Oh
of
my goodness. That's awfully
a
young.
stroke.
Yeah.
And I, because I already told you what I was like, I always identify with little Madeline in the kids' book,
Oh,
where they say she was not afraid of, what was it? She was not afraid of mice. She loved winter snow and ice. To the tiger in the zoo, Madeline just said poo poo. And I always say, and so did I, too many times to my father, like
oh,
talk- talking back. So
right,
when, yeah, so when he died, I, people did not, in my part of the world, people did not talk to their children about their feelings. And that was part of
right.
writing this What's Your Story book for kids. Um, the way more parents do, God love them, now with their kids, like providing space
Yes,
for
yes.
how a child is responding, reacting to some event. That none of that happened. So I was kind of left to the thoughts in my own head. And since I already knew that I was in trouble all the time, I figured I was bad and that all that trouble I was causing actually. So when they say, "What did your father die of?" I thought he died of me for being so they used to call it fresh. And it was not until one day in the cemetery with my mother at my father's grave. We went to his grave together. And I was quite a bit older by this point. I was an adult and not living in the home. And I went to visit her. And so we went there and I broke down about how all my fault it was. And
Oh,
yeah, and she said, I always say this was her shining moment as a mother, where she said, no, honey, it wasn't you, it was work. So
mm,
apparently there was he was in the garment industry, and at that time some whole lot of garments got cut wrong or something, and he was a contractor. So whatever that
Right, right.
was it in from what she could see was very stressful to him. But most people don't die from something like that. So his vascular system was not in such great shape to begin with,
Hmm.
anyway. But that was the first anyone had tried to explain a context for that trauma in our family and that trauma in my life.
So do you think this is what encouraged you to go into the field that you went into?
Well, I was very worried about my mother financially because nobody expected anybody to be dying at 42 years old. So he did not have a lot of life insurance. So my mother, who was my father's bookkeeper, and she was also president of the City of Hope. She was very active in the volunteer world. When he died, she went to work in a steel factory, and I was concerned. So I didn't go to college right out of high school. When he died, I was 15 and a half years old, and I remember going in my neighborhood into all the storefronts trying to get a job so I could help.
Uh,
And no one would hire me. And I always had this fantasy that my mother was going in behind me and telling them, no, we're good. We don't need this. But then I realized it was Pennsylvania and they had child labor laws, and I wasn't old enough for anybody to hire me. But remember, nobody was talking to me about anything. So, like,
exactly.
I was
Yes.
just coming to my own conclusions the best I could. So at that point, I'm actually, I sort of pat myself on the back for what I did. Somehow I got myself into um, the University of Pennsylvania School of Medical Technology, and that was a year and a half program. So I could then come out and get a job, which I did. But I
Mm.
was up to my eyeballs in blood and guts and urine and poop. And from there, I worked for the USDA Biological Control Lab. So then I was with larvae and bugs and stuff, and I got to the point where I really care about people. And this work that I'm doing is like it helps people. That's the whole idea.
Mm.
But it with the direct contact wasn't obviously with the people. So I went to social work school, and that was when I was more on the road to doing the kind of work that I'm doing now. And I was working for a group mental health practice, and the owners of the business just abruptly pulled out one day, and there we were with 200 clients, and they left us a typewriter. So I was like 8.5 months pregnant. I remember we had meetings every night with 6 other women who were also working at this place. And I remember my swollen legs being up on a chair. And somebody said, well, somebody has to take care of the money. And I said, well, I don't know. My mother was my father's bookkeeper. And they said, okay, good. You're the treasurer. And I said, yeah, but like, what do I do exactly? And they said to me, get a brown bag, put all the money in the brown bag, take it home and figure it out.
Oh my goodness.
Is that wild? And I did, which is another example of you don't know what's in there until you need to draw
Exactly.
on it.
Yeah, you're pushed to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I hired immediately an accountant and a tax attorney.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and also an office manager because what did I know? But at some point, I figured, I'm like the administrative director, treasurer of a pretty substantially sized group mental health practice, and I don't know diddly squat about business. So I went to business school.
Oh, wow.
So when I was thinking about, like, I was having an imaginary conversation with you before we got on, and I was thinking about like how did these decisions get made? Like who did this?
Mhm.
And yeah, and I realized, and I want everyone to know, I think this is true for all of us. I think there's a voice inside, and the noisier it is inside, the harder it is to hear it. So if there's a lot of anxious clutter, a lot of negative self-talk and all that stuff that we hear about, um, the more there is of that, the harder it is to hear the voice. I don't think anyone ever gave me like strong advice to do like to go to business school.
Okay.
There are things that happened when I was in the hospital where I had to make very important decisions, and nobody made them for me. So I was wondering, where did the guidance come from? And I think that though there were lots of people around who loved me and supported me and wished me well, they were not telling me what to do. I really, I, I have this thing that if something occurs to me and then I say, yeah, that's pretty crazy, and I kind of ignore it, if it comes back, I start paying attention. And I think that's where my decision making guidance comes from, this inner voice. So I encourage anyone who's listening that the quieter you can get on the inside, the, the smarter the decisions that you make about your life are going to be.
That's so interesting because I just told that to somebody yesterday. I said, you
Mhm.
have to stop and listen before you can
Yeah.
make this major decision because
Yes.
all you're doing is stressing over it and what do I do and you're trying to think of the pros and the cons. Just shut up and stop and get quiet and listen. So essentially,
Good for
that's
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
Because
we get all wrapped up in the issue without just stopping and looking at it from our inner person.
there's science on that there's
Mhm.
something called decision fatigue. People
Ah,
make 35,000 decisions a day. And when your brain, like the person you were telling, that person's brain was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, so much so that the higher brain is depleted. So
mm,
the decision that gets made is there's a good chance it's not going to be the best
oh,
because the part of the brain that's making it is depleted. It's exhausted. So
wow.
this, yeah. So I have like a whole thing on optimizing decision making. And one of the myths is that the more important a decision is, the more time we should take on it. The harder a decision is, the more time we should take making it.
Mhm.
And what people don't realize is that the reason that decision is so hard and you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth is, well, one thing is people are waiting for perfect information and there's no such thing. So you're just exhausting yourself. But the other thing is that there are pluses and minuses either way. And if it's hard to make the decision, it means that the pluses and minuses are approximately equal. Otherwise, the decision would be easy. Like if one alternative was much better than another, it would be easy. But when they're kind of close, then it becomes hard. And there's something called Borodin's ass. So it's this, I have a wonderful PowerPoint picture of the ass. So the ass is looking at two bales of hay, and they look identical. And the ass can't decide which one to eat because they both look sort of equal. It's like when you're trying to make a decision and it's on the one hand, yeah, but on the other hand, and so what happens to the ass is the ass dies of starvation trying to make the decision
Oh,
when it should have just picked one and eaten it, and that applies to
right.
us too. Yeah. So,
Interesting. Very interesting.
mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. There are two books. So please tell us about them and whatever you would like to share about each one.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
So getting to great as I'm turning to the table of contents here. I try to make it about all the things that people drive themselves nuts about. So I have a whole chapter on money. I have another one on play. I have one on work-life quality. I have one on time. I call it the tyranny of time. I have one called Mastering Your Mouth, and it's not about eating. It's about when to speak and when
Mm.
not to speak and what to say and not to say and how to say, like mastering your mouth. And it's all set. I'm a big fan of evolutionary psychology, meaning why we are the way we are and how it's helped us to survive as a species, but how it also, when it's on automatic and we're not very aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it, that sometimes they like to say it's not really a snake, it's just a rope. And but
Mm.
we're programmed deep in our brain like about snakes. So I like to put it in that kind of context. And every chapter has it like a little case study about whatever the topic is and an experiential exercise. And my favorite one is the one on money, which I did myself and it changed my life. And then the kids' book was, I never, I work mostly with adults. I work with adults about their parenting, but I don't work directly with the kids, although I have delightful and delicious ones in my family. But that's not what I was doing professionally. But so many of my adult clients would say things like, why didn't somebody tell me any of this when I was 8? And I was
Okay,
thinking,
right.
yeah, and I was thinking, why didn't somebody tell me when I was 8? So I looked to see if anyone did. And I didn't, I found books on mindfulness, but I didn't find a book like the one I wrote that had these present day examples and also teaching kids how the mind makes up stories for us to live in, and that's a good thing because it brings some order to our lives. But sometimes the stories are just stories, and it's good to be able to learn the difference. So that's a major message in
What
the
age?
book. And then they get to write stories. And like I said, we can create better middles and endings if we're aware and
What
more.
age group would this appeal to, the book?
So it's called middle grade. It's about 8 to 11-ish or
Okay.
12. Yeah, 8 to 12-ish.
Well, first of all, is it a workbook? Should it be used as the first one? Should it be used as a workbook and take the time to get through it? Or is
Well, The kids' book is definitely a workbook.
Okay.
The other one, because it has exercises, I suppose you could say it was a workbook, although I have to say I didn't think of it as that sort of.
In other words, could it be used like in a group setting as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think that would be great. The exercises are fun and enlightening, I think.
I appreciate you being here today and everything that you shared. And is there anything else and anything that you would like to share with us about anything that
You
we
know,
didn't cover?
there's this thing that I find myself sharing at the end of conversations like ours, because for some reason it doesn't come up during the conversation, but
Okay.
it's something I learned that I think is really precious and powerful. And it's the concept of good company. And good company, when I was in the hospital, actually, I was studying, believe it or not, before that, Advaita Vedanta, pre-Hindu tradition. So it goes to the same place as mindfulness and Buddhism. It just goes on a different path to get there, but it goes kind of to the same place. And I love it. And one of my tutors brought me this book, Good Company. That's the title of the book, and it's out of that tradition. And what good company is, it's not only the people that we're with, although it is very much that, but it's the books we read, it's the music that we listen to, it's the food we eat. It is, and I want to put a line under this one, it's the thoughts in our head, which are not always good company. So the idea is we do get to pick and choose some of this stuff. And the more we're in charge of what we let into our lives and try to have it be the finest quality that it can be, I think the more we enrich and inspire our lives. So
What a
that's
way
that.
to end this conversation. That is absolutely powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. I'm just going to say that on my website at madeleineWeiss.com, I have there's a tab that says power breathing,
Okay.
and it's a free download, a free one-page download. It's like, I like to call it everybody's best friend forever to make this, if you can do this, to make this exercise to be a part of your life. It's free. You can use it anywhere, anytime, for any reason to put your higher brain in charge of these 35,000 decisions we all make every
Wow.
day. So that's there. There are hundreds of free blog posts, and there's a little field where you can put in a subject and it'll bring up whichever the
Right.
pertinent posts. And the posts are all about, again, just the everyday things that we all do. I also offer a free strategy session. There's a tab on there for that, and there are icons for the book. So everything is there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you for being on
Thank you.
Never Ever Give Up Hope. It was perfect. I appreciated everything you
Oh,
shared.
I
Definitely
do too.
inspiring and lots to think about. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.
Feeling stuck in your prayer life? You're not alone. Join Pray the Answer webinar led by prayer coach Carol Graham. Each session will help you shift from fear to faith and from worry to worship. Learn how to pray God's word and receive real answers. Visit prayingmiracles.com to register today.